I make $80 an hour making these beautiful charcuterie boards, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. Welcome back to the shop, everybody. Today we're going to do a fun project. We're going to make a charcuterie board, or a serving platter, if you will, out of this amazing piece of ancient redwood. Oh, I don't know how old this is. I bought it at auction. It was advertised as ancient redwood, and it's a trusted supplier. I'm going to guess it's 500 to 1,000 years old. Pretty amazing stuff. Now, if you check this wood out, it's got a beautiful flame streak right through the middle here. And on the back side, it's also very pretty, but this is going to be the top side. And it's kind of ideal because it's the way the bark is, I've got a natural handle. So I've got a couple of things to take care of. I've got to take care of this little stuff. I'm going to get the Dremel tool out, and I'm going to pour a little bit of resin in there. I'm going to use some Star Bond to seal a couple of these cracks. But by and large, this thing is in great condition. Now, this is a perfect beginner's project. All you need as far as tools going to be an oscillating sander of some sort. We're going to sand this out to 220 grit, and then we're going to apply Odie's oil and Odie's wax. And it's going to give a beautiful food safe finish. It'll give it a matte finish, which we want. I don't want gloss on redwood. That would look terrible. We've got quite a bit of cleanup here. You can see the edges where the bark was. So I'm going to go through. In fact, I've got a little bit of bark left over right there. So I'm going to go through with a tool and just kind of pry that stuff up. It won't take very long at all. I've got some burl. Let's see. You can see the sharp stuff here. Well, that wouldn't be very good for somebody to be touching. It's really quite sharp. So I'm going to have to sand that down smooth. But this is going to be a pretty simple project, and I think it's going to be fun. So let's get into it right now. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and peel out this bark. Now, oftentimes I can use like a putty knife or a little screwdriver and just kind of pry this stuff up. And sometimes you can do it with your thumbnail. But sometimes it also requires a wire wheel, and it feels like that is pretty solid. So we'll take a look at that as we get closer, and let's see how this works. And I'm not gouging the wood as I'm doing this. I'm just kind of finessing it. We'll see how far the finesse will take us. Yeah, I think that wood is really, that bark is really solid in there. And what we don't want is just that loose, crappy stuff, right? Okay. So I think, yeah, I'm going to work at that just a little bit. I don't think I'm going to wire wheel it. I think I'm just going to take off that little flaky stuff, and then I'll hit it with the sander. So that'll be step number one. Well, I've got my Dremel tool. You can see the bit right here. That gets in there real nice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go after this little bit of bark inclusion. I won't need to go very far, but poke it around. The crack goes in a little ways. So when I pour resin to infill this, it's going to try to soak up. So I may have to fill this a couple of times. So this is how I do it. Sorry for the noise, but just wanted to show you how it works. Okay, so I'm done with the dentistry here, filling cavities or something, drilling cavities. So that worked out fine. I'll hit it with high pressure air and then mix up a little bit of resin. And I'll show you a trick on how to pour the resin without spuging stuff all over the place. So again, you don't need a Dremel tool, and that's really important. Again, the oscillating sander is the only must-have. In place of a Dremel tool, you can use a little awl, little flathead screwdriver, And you can get in there with a funky dollar store putty knife like this one. It's just a matter of slowly scraping it out, doing the best you can. So don't sweat it. So here's a pro tip for you. What I want to do is create a dam around this hole so I can pour resin down into it and it doesn't just spread all over the board. So check this out. We're now crafters, and this is just a hot glue gun. I wipe down the wood and I just create a dam all the way around it. Doesn't have to be pretty. You just don't want any holes. So I'm going to let that sit for just a few minutes, and then we're going to mix up some epoxy. I'm using Bob Smith Industries Quick Cure. And the cool thing about this stuff is you've got 5 minutes to work with, but in 15 minutes, it's fully cured. And I can keep moving on this project. That's far better than, say, using tabletop resin or something like that. So I'm just going to pour equal amounts. It's a guesstimate. I don't know if you've ever been to a ancient redwood forest. My wife Kathy and I have been very fortunate to do that. We lived in Northern California, so the redwoods were pretty close. And we've had a lot of fun times up in the redwood forest. It's pretty magical, so quiet. It smells so good. We've taken our kayaks and kayaked down the rivers, having river otters follow us. That was pretty cool. Amazing experience. Highly recommend it if you ever get the opportunity. So this stuff is nice and stinky and takes a little bit to mix it. We'll come back in just a minute and I'll show you how I'm applying it into that little nook and cranny. I had a crazy idea. I decided I wanted to tint that resin just a little bit, so I'm going to be using this Ecopoxy Ocean, which makes sense because the redwoods are right there at the ocean. I've used this on a number of my crosses, and the colors are beautiful. Okay, let's get her in there. Just like that. So I'm going to kind of blend it out just a little bit so it stays in the dam. The color's going to be cool. Okay, we'll let that cure and get back to it. All right, I am excited. This cured very nicely, and I love the color. So after I filmed, I thought, I've got that little bit of epoxy left over. I'm going to hit some of these bigger cracks. That only took a moment, and that's going to work out just perfectly. I'm going to fill in a couple of these little cracks with Starbond, and that's so minor. So then it's all about sanding. I'll be sanding the edges as well as the top and the bottom. The top and bottom, I'm going to start at 120, go to 180, and finish at 220. I'm going to water pop this and then resand it at 220. So that way, if somebody washes this, you don't get that fuzzy feeling, which is really nasty. And then we're going to finish it up with Odie's oil and then Odie's wax. So that's going to be pretty cool. I'll do a time lapse at some point in the video to just show you what my sanding is looking like. But this is going to be really cool. Now, one last thought. I have made a bunch of redwood platters, and they've been ancient redwood, and they've all sold. So I get a premium for it, and the wood is not cheap to begin with. So they sell. Do yourself a favor if you want to use something like ancient redwood. Get onto the internet and see who's selling them. I buy this stuff at auction, and it's out there. Just do a little sniffing around. Okay, I will get to it. Do me a favor, hit subscribe and hit the bell so you get all of my notifications. I'd really appreciate it. I'm sanded out to 220. Everything feels great. I sanded all the edges. And you know, there were a lot of sharp edges. That's my second piece of 220 grit. So it really ate some of this up. But what I do is just kind of a quality check to run my hand around the edges and make sure that somebody's not going to get cut or get a splinter. And you know, redwood splinters actually are kind of a bummer. They are very slow to heal for some reason. So we're ready to water pop, and let me show you what that looks like. So this gives us an idea of what this charcuterie board is going to look like. Now look at this grain. That is fantastic. Let's pop the other side. Well, this side's pretty too. The red grain isn't quite as showy, but this is. And if you look carefully, there's like a horse head right there. How about that? So I'm going to wipe off any of the excess. And I'm going to put this on a rack. And I'll show you what the rack looked like. And I'm going to also put a fan in front of this thing. Where did my rack go? There it is. Yeah, I want to get it dry sooner than later so we can keep moving on in this project. So right now I've got about an hour into this. So this is going very quick. I'll have less than 2 hours into this project. All right, time to finish. Now I'm using Odie's oil for the very first time. And you know, I already have a great finishing system, but I'm just curious. And I'm going to do another video just on a comparison review. But my go-to, normally I apply my board butter. It's a nice oil and wax. And then I finish it up with the Carnauba wood finish and polish from my friend Skylar Ewing Woodworking. And it does a fabulous job. But this is going to be fun. Odie's, it's very thick, kind of buttery, more like honey actually. And I've given it a good stir per the directions. And I'm going to go ahead and pan down and let you see how I apply the finish and what the steps are. Well, according to Odie's, you use very little of the product. So I'm going to use my little stir stick here and just kind of dab some on. I know it depends on the wood. Some woods really absorb. Redwood should absorb a fair amount. If we were doing a real hardwood, probably not so much. And I'm going to use my power buffer to apply this. I'm going to do this in time lapse because it's going to be noisy. It'll save your ears. Well, that was a little bit different. I had to use a little more product than what I anticipated, and I realized that it's probably because the pad that I was using had never had any Odie's on it, so that makes some sense. But after I applied a little bit more, I got the coverage that I wanted. The redwood, as I anticipated, just kind of soaked it up big time. So what I'm going to do is let this sit for about an hour, and I'm going to come back with my wool pad, and I'm going to buff it out. And then I'm going to use a white terry cloth and wipe it down just to make sure I've got all the Odie's off. And I'm going to do that front and back. The sides, I'm going to use my board butter. There's no way that I'm going to be able to get my pad in there and not have it just come to pieces like it was kind of already doing. So that's looking good. And then I'm going to wait 24 hours and apply the Odie's wax. And I'm hoping that gives it kind of a nice little sheen, and it should give it a nice protective coating too. All right. Well, I'm sure liking the way this looks. So, you know, just a reminder, I use the buffer. You don't need to use a buffer. You can use a terry cloth, a clean terry cloth like this. Think like an old bathroom towel. And you can apply your Odie's and then wipe it down, wipe it totally clean. So don't get hung up on the power tools. This is a simple project, and you can do it very easily. So I am going to use my buffer because, well, I have it. And I'll do that in time lapse to save your ears and your time. Well, it's time to apply the Odie's wax. And what I'm going to be doing is using just a little foam applicator. And this stuff is firm, kind of like the carnauba that I use on a regular basis. So I'm going to get in there with my thumbnail, kind of scrape it up a little bit. And then I'll be able to scoop some of this up with my sponge. And I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pan down right now for you. All right, so you can see what I've done. I've just kind of loosened some stuff up here. And I'm going to put some pressure and apply my little sponge applicator in there. Looks a little chunky, but let's see what happens. Get some extra off the jar. There we go. So it's easy to apply. And in 2 hours, we're going to be coming back and removing this. There's two ways to do that. You can use a clean cloth, again, that terry cloth or bathroom towel. And once we do that, we have the option, we can use a buffer at that point and just kind of buff in this wax, creating friction. And that'll set the wax in a little bit more than if you would with the terry cloth. Since I do have the buffer, I'm going to do that, but you don't have to. So earlier, at the beginning of this, I talked about how you can make $80 an hour by making these things. That's what I'm making right now with this particular project, based on what I bought the wood for and what I'm going to be able to sell it on my Etsy. That's not bad income when really, again, your only true power tool that you absolutely need is an oscillating sander. So I think it's a good opportunity for people to make some money. Obviously, there's a time investment with your Etsy store, your Facebook marketing. I spent quite a bit of time doing that. So I thought the Odie's oil was pretty good. I like the fact that it's like non-toxic. Some finishes smell terrible and you end up tasting it for a long time. That's really nasty. I'm kind of sensitive to that stuff. The Odie's oil has kind of a lemon fresh scent to it. So I appreciate that. My board butter has absolutely no scent. And I think that board butter does as good of a job as the Odie's. It's my opinion, not me trying to sell product. Okay, there we go. I'm well covered, and we're going to let this sit for 2 hours. I'll come back and show you how I'm going to finish it. Well, this has been a fun project. So I'm going to just simply wipe this down. I can feel the material coming off. It kind of goes from being sticky to a more slick kind of surface. There you go. Let's do the opposite side. That looks great. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is apply my buffer to this thing. Awesome. Looks really good. One more wipe and we're done. Wow, that is pretty. Boy, I sure love that ancient redwood. It's so pretty. Well, thank you for following along. I really do appreciate it. If you're liking the content, please hit subscribe, hit the bell to get all my notifications. Stay tuned. I've got plenty more content coming up, and we're going to continue to have a good time in the shop. We'll see you next time.